In a private hospital archive, yellowed birth certificates reveal a truth that defies medical impossibility. 3 young lives connected by more than chance challenge the foundations of wealth and certainty. Between official documents and unofficial destiny lies a story that proves some bonds transcend all barriers. As truth emerges from bureaucracy, a powerful man's world transforms forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights of the archive hummed, a counterpoint to the rustle of Alara's gloved fingers as she traced the faded ink on the birth certificates. 3 identical dates, 3 different mothers, all belonging to families etched in the city's gilded elite. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a physical manifestation of the impossible truth staring back at her. The air hung heavy with the scent of aging paper, and dust motes danced in the pale light, mirroring the chaos swirling within her. Alara, usually a creature of meticulous order, felt a tremor of defiance. This wasn't just a clerical anomaly. It was a whisper of a secret, a carefully concealed lie. The names themselves spoke volumes: Morrison, Avignon, Reed. The Morrisons, powerful and aloof, their wealth a fortress built on secrets. The Avignons, artists struggling amidst their bohemian glamour, their lives painted in shades of vulnerability. And the Reeds, a name that seemed to evaporate into thin air, leaving only a lingering absence. A shiver traced its way down her spine. The sheer audacity of it all, 3 children born on the same day, to such vastly different lives, hinted at something far darker than mere coincidence. Duty, the quiet, unwavering loyalty she felt for her work, clashed violently with a burgeoning curiosity that threatened to consume her. She had always been a woman of quiet contemplation, but the weight of this discovery threatened to shatter her placid existence. The hushed silence of the archive felt suddenly oppressive, the walls closing in on her growing apprehension. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, leaving a glistening trail on her smooth skin. This wasn't just about documents. It was about lives, about truths hidden in plain sight, and Alara knew, deep within her soul, that she couldn't ignore it. The cool, sterile air of the archive seemed to cling to Alara, a stark contrast to the burning questions churning within her. She traced the dates again, the crisp lines a mockery of the chaos blooming in her mind. The hushed reverence of the room, usually a comfort, now felt suffocating. 3 children born on the same day to families worlds apart. Impossible. Leaving the archive, the city's vibrant pulse felt jarring. The cacophony of car horns and distant sirens clashed with the quiet intensity of her discovery. She found herself drawn towards the opulent Morrison mansion, its imposing stone facade radiating wealth and cold indifference. The wrought iron gates seemed to sneer at her, a physical representation of the family's impenetrable aura. Suddenly, a flash of memory, a grainy newspaper clipping, tucked away in her grandmother's attic. A mention of a groundbreaking fertility clinic, a whispered scandal. A doctor's name, barely legible, but familiar. Dr. Albright. Days bled into weeks. Alara burrowed deeper into the hospital's records, her apartment transforming into a chaotic battlefield of papers, files, and half-eaten meals. Sleep became a luxury, her days and nights blurring into a relentless pursuit of the truth. The weight of her secret investigation pressed down, a heavy cloak of guilt and exhilaration. One rainy afternoon, a name leaped from a faded ledger: Liam Morrison. The chilling realization hit her, one of the children. She stared at the entry, a cold dread creeping into her heart. Liam Morrison, the son of Arthur Morrison, the ruthless tycoon whose empire was built on secrets. That night, the city's lights blurred through her rain-streaked window. The faint scent of jasmine from the potted plant on her windowsill couldn't mask the stale smell of fear and obsession. The impossible truth whispered in the silence, a chilling melody only she could hear. The 3 children, a conspiracy hidden in plain sight, a truth that threatened to shake the foundations of the city's elite. And Alara, the quiet archivist, held the key. The rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm brewing inside Alara. Liam Morrison's name, etched into the dusty ledger, pulsed in her mind like a trapped heartbeat. The scent of old paper and damp earth filled her tiny apartment, a suffocating perfume of her obsessive pursuit. She felt a tremor of fear, a cold hand gripping her chest. This wasn't just a historical anomaly. It was a living, breathing secret threatening to engulf her. She pulled out a worn photograph from a file. Liam as a boy, a starkly handsome child with his father's steely gaze. The image felt charged with an unspoken tension, a silent scream trapped within the glossy paper. Alara felt a pang of sympathy for the boy, a stranger she felt strangely connected to. This wasn't just about uncovering a medical scandal. It was about the lives irrevocably altered by it. Days later, she found another name, Isabella Avignon. A stark contrast to Liam's image, Isabella's childhood photo radiated warmth and chaotic energy. Paint-splattered clothes, a mischievous grin, eyes brimming with artistic passion. She looked nothing like the wealthy, controlled Morrison family. The contrast only intensified Alara's unease. The third name remained elusive, a ghost haunting the edges of her investigation. Only a cryptic note, referring to the Reed estate, and a sealed file marked confidential offered any clue. The weight of her discovery pressed down. Doubt gnawed at her, whispering insidious lies of paranoia and delusion. But the evidence, however fragmented, was undeniable. 3 children, 3 different worlds, bound by an impossible hidden connection. The fear was tangible, a chilling presence in her cramped apartment. Yet, a spark of defiance flickered within her. She wouldn't back down. Not now. This was more than just a job. It was a quest for justice, a fight for the truth, even if it meant facing the wrath of the city's most powerful man. The faintest hint of dawn painted the sky a pale lavender as Alara, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and determination, started to draft a letter. It was time to share her burden, to seek help, even if it meant risking everything. The chipped porcelain of her teacup warmed Alara's hands, a small comfort against the icy dread that had settled in her bones. The hospital's sterile scent, usually a familiar balm, now felt suffocating. She stared at the 3 birth certificates, their crisp edges mocking the chaos swirling within her. Identical dates, different mothers, 3 families orbiting the same exclusive circle of wealth and influence. A sudden memory, sharp as a shard of glass, pierced her quiet contemplation. The whispered rumors in the archive, hushed conversations about a groundbreaking fertility clinic, a doctor who'd pushed boundaries, a scandal buried deep beneath layers of official secrecy. The cold dread intensified, clinging to her like a shroud. She traced Liam Morrison's name with a trembling fingertip. The photograph, tucked into the file, showed a boy with piercing blue eyes, an echo of his father's ruthlessness already visible in his young face. The image spoke volumes, a silent testament to a life lived under the weight of expectation. A sigh escaped her lips. The meticulous archivist, so precise in her work, felt utterly lost in the labyrinth of secrets she'd unearthed. Doubt, a venomous serpent, coiled in her heart. Was she chasing shadows? Was this a grand delusion, fueled by too many hours spent amongst dusty records? Her gaze shifted to Isabella Avignon's file. The photograph, in stark contrast to Liam's, was a burst of vibrant color, a child covered in paint, her laughter seemingly captured in the image itself. Isabella, the file suggested, was a whirlwind of artistic talent, her life a testament to a fiery passion that seemed to clash wildly with her family's reserved nature. Alara wondered about the clash between these worlds, her heart aching for the unseen struggles. The third file, the one marked Reed, remained stubbornly shut. A single note, a scrawled line mentioning the Reed estate, teased her, a silent dare. The elusive Casper Reed, a ghost in the shadows, held the final piece of the puzzle. Alara stood, the weight of her discovery pressing down. The rain outside had intensified, drumming a frantic rhythm against the window panes. It mirrored the storm brewing inside her. She knew with a certainty that transcended logic that she couldn't stop. This was more than a job. It was a duty, a desperate need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The faint scent of old paper and fear mingled in the air as she made a decision. She would reach out to Anna. The risk was immense, but the potential for justice, even for these strangers, was too great to ignore. The rain hammered against the ancient library windows, a counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of Alara's heart. She traced the elegant script of Arthur Morrison's name, the ink bleeding slightly into the brittle paper. The photograph showed a stern, imposing man, his eyes devoid of warmth. A chill, unrelated to the damp autumn air, snaked down her spine. He was powerful, undeniably so, and that power reeked of something dark and hidden. A soft sigh escaped her lips. "He's a monster," she murmured, the words catching in her throat. The weight of her discovery pressed down on her, a suffocating blanket of dread. She moved to Isabella Avignon's file. The vibrant colors of the childhood photograph were a stark contrast to the Morrison file's starkness. Isabella's bright, inquisitive eyes seemed to peer back at her. Alara felt a pang of empathy, a fierce protectiveness for this stranger. The Avignon family's financial struggles, detailed in sparse notes, painted a picture of quiet desperation, a world away from the Morrisons' gilded cage. The Reed file remained a frustrating enigma. The single note, "Reed Estate," inquired discreetly, felt like a taunt, a challenge. Caspar Reed, a name whispered only in hushed tones, was a ghost in this elaborate game of secrets, the missing piece of a puzzle that was slowly, terrifyingly, revealing itself. A piece of the puzzle that terrified her. Alara picked up her phone, the cool glass a comfort against her clammy palm. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over Anna's contact. The risk felt monumental. Exposing Arthur Morrison, a titan of industry, was akin to declaring war on a god. But the faces of Liam, Isabella, and the unseen Caspar flickered in her mind's eye. Their lives, their futures, hung in the balance. A deep breath, a silent prayer, and then she dialed. The ringing tone echoed in the cavernous silence of the archive, each ring a hammer blow against the dam holding back her fear. Anna's voice, bright and familiar, was a lifeline. "Alara? What's wrong?" Alara's voice trembled slightly. "I found something incredible and terrifying." The words tumbled out, a torrent of pent-up anxiety and revelation. 3 children, born on the same day, 3 different mothers, 3 powerful families, and a secret so big, it could shatter everything. The musty scent of aged paper and dust clung to Alara like a second skin. She sat hunched over the 3 birth certificates, the faint yellow glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across her tired face. The identical birth dates mocked her, a cruel joke played by fate, or something far more sinister. Outside, the city hummed, a distant, muted roar against the archive's hushed silence. Alara felt a tremor of fear, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. This wasn't just a historical anomaly. It was a carefully constructed lie. A frantic tapping at her door startled her. Anna, her journalist friend, burst in, her face etched with worry. "Alara, I've been trying to reach you all day. Did you get my messages?" "Anna," Alara whispered, pushing the certificates towards her friend. "Look at this." Anna's breath hitched. "My God," she murmured, her eyes wide with disbelief. The same birth date, 3 different mothers, Morrison, Avignon, Reed. "The Morrisons," Alara said, her voice low, "are the wealthiest family in the city. The Avignons, struggling artists. And the Reeds, they're a complete mystery." She felt a prickle of anxiety. "It's like a puzzle, a twisted, impossible puzzle." Anna traced the elegant script on the documents, her fingers lingering on each name. "This goes beyond coincidence. This is deliberate, a cover-up." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the photographs accompanying the certificates. Liam Morrison's steely gaze, Isabella Avignon's hopeful smile, and the missing photograph for Caspar Reed, fueled by a gut feeling and the mounting evidence, solidified a terrifying theory. "It's like they're connected somehow." Her voice trembled, a fragile whisper in the vast room. "And someone wants to keep it hidden." The fear, previously a cold knot, had blossomed into a burning anxiety in her chest. The weight of what she'd uncovered was immense, threatening to crush her. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken dread and the weight of a monumental discovery. The next move, Alara knew, was one that could change their lives forever. The archive's hushed atmosphere pressed in on Alara. The faint scent of old paper and dust mingled with the metallic tang of fear in her throat. Anna's worried face, illuminated by the desk lamp, mirrored her own apprehension. The 3 birth certificates, stark white against the aged mahogany, seemed to pulse with a hidden energy. "The Morrisons," Alara repeated, her voice barely a whisper, each word heavy with unspoken implications. She ran a trembling hand over the crisp lines of Liam Morrison's birth certificate. His photograph, a boyish grin barely concealing an underlying intensity, stared back at her. Anna, ever the pragmatist, tapped a finger on Isabella Avignon's certificate. The young woman's smile, captured in the faded photograph, was radiant, yet a shadow seemed to lurk in the depths of her eyes. "The Avignons are struggling, yes, but they're not desperate enough to fabricate this." The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic tick-tock of an antique clock in the corner. Alara's gaze fell on the empty space where Caspar Reed's photograph should have been. A chill crawled down her spine. The missing photo, the absent family, the sheer improbability of it all. It was a chilling symphony of secrets. "It's not just a coincidence," Alara said, her voice regaining a fraction of its strength. "This is deliberate. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to hide this. And why? What were they so desperate to conceal?" Anna leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. "Think about it. 3 children, born on the same day, different mothers, elite families, and one completely missing. This smells like a massive cover-up, possibly involving a fertility clinic." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Alara nodded slowly, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The weight of the discovery, the potential ramifications, the sheer audacity of it all. It threatened to overwhelm her. And the power involved, Arthur Morrison. He wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens his empire. The fear that had been a cold knot in her stomach now burned like wildfire. The next move, she knew, could have devastating consequences. But the allure of the truth, the need to understand the impossible connection between these 3 lives, was a force too powerful to ignore. The puzzle demanded to be solved, no matter the cost. The mahogany desk felt cold beneath Alara's trembling hands. The faint scent of ozone, a lingering byproduct of the hospital's aging electrical system, prickled her nostrils. Outside, the city hummed a discordant lullaby, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of the archive. Anna's quiet sigh broke the tension. "The Morrisons," Anna repeated, her voice low, echoing Alara's earlier words. "Arthur Morrison. That name alone screams power and ruthlessness. He wouldn't hesitate to bury this deeper than anyone could dig." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on Isabella Avignon's photograph. The young woman's eyes, though bright in the picture, held a haunted quality that mirrored the gnawing unease in Alara's own heart. But why? Why would he go to such lengths? A sudden gust of wind rattled the archive window, sending a shiver down Alara's spine. The missing Reed photograph pressed heavily on her mind. The absence felt calculated, a deliberate omission in a meticulously constructed narrative. "It's not just about power, Alara," Anna said, her voice softer now, laced with a growing understanding. "It's about control. Control over their lives, their identities, their very pasts." She paused, her eyes widening slightly. "What if this isn't just some corporate scandal? What if it's something bigger?" The implication hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating like the dust motes dancing in the moonlight filtering through the window. Alara felt a surge of adrenaline, a potent cocktail of fear and determination. This wasn't just about dusty birth certificates anymore. This was about 3 lives, 3 families, and a conspiracy that stretched far beyond the confines of the hospital walls. The weight of it, the enormity of the potential consequences, threatened to crush her. Yet, A stubborn ember of resolve burned brightly within. She wouldn't rest until she uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. The missing piece, the elusive Casper Reed, was the key, and Alara knew, with a chilling certainty, that finding him was the next, dangerous step. The scent of old paper and dust clung to Alara like a second skin. She sat hunched over Arthur Morrison's file, the stark lines of his biography a stark contrast to the swirling chaos in her mind. His photograph, a cold, calculating gaze fixed on the camera, felt almost tangible. He exuded an aura of power, a man who commanded respect or fear in equal measure. But beneath the polished exterior, Alara sensed a fragility, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. A single, crumpled photograph slipped from the file's folder. It depicted a younger Arthur, his face etched with a sorrow that belied his current demeanor. He was standing beside a woman, her arm wrapped protectively around his shoulders, her smile both radiant and heartbreaking. Alara felt a pang of empathy, a flicker of understanding for the man behind the ruthless businessman. This was a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "Anna was right," she whispered, the words lost in the cavernous silence of the archive. "It's not just about power. It's about loss, about a past he desperately wants to bury." The image evoked a sense of profound loss, of a life irrevocably altered. Alara traced the lines of the woman's face, her heart aching for a sorrow she couldn't fully comprehend. This photograph, a silent witness to a hidden tragedy, felt like a crucial piece of the puzzle, a doorway into Arthur Morrison's tormented past, and perhaps the key to understanding the impossible connection between the three children. The weight of her discovery settled heavily on Alara's shoulders. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, a familiar anxiety that had been her constant companion since the discovery of the birth certificates. But now, mingled with the fear, was a burgeoning sense of purpose. She had to uncover the truth, not only for the sake of the three families, but also for the quiet woman in the old photograph, a victim whose story remained untold. She had to give her a voice. The city's distant hum, once a discordant lullaby, now felt like a drumbeat urging her forward, propelling her toward the dangerous but necessary next step. The search for Casper Reed had begun. The fluorescent lights of the archive hummed a monotonous tune, a stark counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of Alara's heart. Dust motes danced in the weak beams, illuminating the fragile edges of the photograph she held. Arthur Morrison, young, haunted, his arm awkwardly close to a woman whose smile held a fragile beauty. The woman, whose name remained unknown, was a ghost, yet her presence resonated with a poignant intensity. Alara traced the woman's faded image, her fingertip lingering on the delicate curve of her cheek. A wave of empathy washed over her, drowning the fear that had become her constant companion. This wasn't just a cold case, a puzzle to solve. It was a story of loss, of a love betrayed, of a life shattered. A soft knock startled her. Anna stood in the doorway, her face etched with concern. "Find anything?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alara, still clutching the photograph, looked up, her eyes glistening. "More than I expected," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. This woman, she's the key." Anna stepped closer, her gaze drawn to the photograph. "Who is she?" "I don't know her name," Alara admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I feel like I know her story. The sorrow in his eyes, it matches the coldness in his present self. It's a missing piece, Anna, a piece that could unlock everything." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of a distant clock, each second an echo of the untold story. The weight of their discovery hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that spoke of secrets buried deep and truths yet to be unearthed. The scent of old paper and dust seemed to thicken, a suffocating blanket of the past. Outside, the city throbbed with life, a world oblivious to the silent drama unfolding within the hushed confines of the archive. But for Alara and Anna, the world had shrunk to this small, dusty room, this single, faded photograph, this untold story that held the potential to shatter a man's empire and reveal the truth behind three impossible lives. The search for Casper Reed was not just a search for a person. It was a desperate search for answers, for justice, for the lost voice of a woman trapped within a forgotten photograph. The mahogany desk felt cold beneath Alara's trembling fingers. The scent of aging paper and dust, usually comforting, now felt suffocating. Arthur Morrison's youthful face, a stark contrast to the ruthless businessman she knew, stared back from the photograph. His eyes, though smiling, held a shadow, a premonition of the icy hardness to come. A single, delicate gold locket rested against his chest, partially obscured by his jacket. A soft sigh escaped Alara's lips. The weight of her discovery pressed down on her, a physical burden. She'd unearthed more than just birth certificates. She'd unearthed a ghost of a past, a hidden sorrow that mirrored the coldness of the present. The woman beside him, nameless, yet vividly present, was the linchpin, the missing piece to a puzzle that defied logic. Anna's voice, hushed and concerned, broke through her reverie. The locket? It's significant, isn't it? Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the tiny detail. It's like a silent promise, a secret kept. She traced the outline of the locket with her fingertip, the cool metal a strange comfort against her skin. This woman, she's the missing link. Finding her could unravel everything. The archive fell silent, the only sound the rhythmic tick of a grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a heavy beat against the growing tension. Outside, the city roared with unseen life, a stark contrast to the hushed stillness of their secret world. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the enormity of their discovery, the implications of a truth buried for decades. "We need to find her," Anna said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "We need to find out who she is, and what happened." Her eyes held a determination that mirrored Alara's own. The risk was immense, the potential repercussions devastating. Yet, in that shared gaze, a silent understanding passed between them. They were bound together now, not just by friendship, but by a shared quest for truth. A truth that promised to shatter a carefully constructed world and expose a secret that defied medical possibility. The search for Casper Reed had become a desperate race against time, a pursuit of a phantom, a whisper of a secret that threatened to consume them all. The stale air of the archive hung heavy, thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten dreams. Alara traced the faded ink of Arthur Morrison's birth certificate, the elegant script a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the man she knew. His youthful face in the photograph mocked her, a boyish grin belying the steely gaze she'd witnessed in his later years. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. This wasn't just about a medical anomaly. It was about a life deliberately obscured, a truth buried beneath layers of wealth and power. "The locket," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible above the ticking grandfather clock. "It's more than just jewelry. It's a clue." Alara nodded, her fingers lingering on the image. The gold locket, a tiny glint against Arthur's chest, pulsed with unspoken secrets. She pictured the unnamed woman beside him, her face obscured by shadows, a silent witness to a life lived in the dark. It represents a connection, a bond, a promise broken, perhaps. And that promise, Anna continued, her voice gaining strength, leads to Casper Reed. We have to find him. The weight of their responsibility pressed down on them, a palpable presence in the hushed room. Outside, the city thrummed with indifferent energy, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of their shared secret. Fear mingled with a fierce determination in Alara's heart. The risk was enormous, the potential repercussions catastrophic. Yet, the pull of the unknown, the promise of uncovering a truth that defied medical possibility, was too strong to ignore. "We start with the clinic," Alara decided, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "The doctor, the records, everything points there." She felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate energy coursing through her veins. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret anymore. It was about facing down a powerful enemy, a fight for justice against a world built on lies. The path ahead was treacherous, but Alara, spurred by a fierce sense of purpose, was ready to walk it. The hunt for Casper Reed and the truth behind Arthur Morrison's hidden past had begun. The musty scent of aging paper clung to Alara's clothes as she left the archive, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her. The faint glow of the city lights outside offered little solace. She clutched the 3 birth certificates, their brittle paper a tangible link to a secret that defied logic. Arthur Morrison's name, crisp and imposing, felt like a brand on her soul. His icy gaze, the ghost of his presence, haunted her. She walked, the city noise a muffled roar against the pounding of her heart. A sudden chill pierced the autumn air. She pulled her coat tighter, the fabric a poor shield against the rising fear. Reaching her apartment, the quiet was deafening, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos in her mind. Her small, book-lined apartment felt confining, the familiar comfort suddenly suffocating. She spread the certificates on the worn wooden table, the yellowed parchment seeming to glow under the lamplight. 3 lives, interwoven against all odds, pulsed with an unspoken drama. Liam Morrison, the aloof heir; Isabella Avignon, the tormented artist; and the elusive Casper Reed, a phantom whispered about in hushed tones. A sudden, sharp rap at the door startled her. Anna's entrance was a whirlwind of energy. "Alara, I've been trying to reach you. I found something unbelievable. Connects to the clinic, a Dr. Albright. He's disappeared." Anna's voice trembled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Her usually bright eyes held a shadow of unease. Alara felt a surge of adrenaline. Albright, the name echoed a terrifying possibility. The records, they were always incomplete. This is bigger than we thought. Anna tossed a crumpled newspaper article onto the table. A blurred photograph showed a younger Arthur Morrison, his arm around a woman whose face was obscured by shadows. "This woman, it's the same locket he always wears," Anna whispered, her voice strained. Alara felt a lump forming in her throat. The locket, a silent, golden witness to a life shrouded in secrecy. The clinic, the advanced reproductive technologies, it all points to a deliberate cover-up. Arthur Morrison, he orchestrated this. A shared silence descended, heavy with the weight of their discovery. The fragile birth certificates seemed to mock them with their quiet certainty, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning within them. The game had changed, and they were no longer players. They were pawns in a dangerous, high-stakes contest where the truth itself was the ultimate prize. The hunt for Casper Reed was no longer a simple investigation. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to expose a truth buried beneath decades of lies. Alara's breath hitched. The newspaper photo, grainy and blurred, showed a younger Arthur Morrison, his arm possessively around a woman whose face was obscured by shadow. But it was the locket, a familiar glint of gold nestled at his chest, that sent a chill down her spine. The same locket he always wore, a silent golden key to a hidden past. Anna's voice, usually a vibrant allegro, was a hushed tremor. "This woman..." The article mentions a fertility clinic scandal, something about experimental procedures. It's all connected, Alara. It has to be. The stale air of Alara's apartment, usually comforting, felt thick and suffocating. The scent of old books mingled with the metallic tang of fear. She ran a hand over the rough surface of the birth certificates, their brittle texture mirroring the fragility of her own composure. 3 lives, bound together by a secret so profound it threatened to shatter their carefully constructed realities. "Albright?" Alara whispered, the name a cold stone in her gut. The doctor's disappearance, previously a troubling anomaly, now screamed of a deliberate cover-up. A cover-up orchestrated by Arthur Morrison. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Anna's gaze, usually sparkling with wit, held a newfound intensity. "We need to find Casper Reed," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "He's the missing piece. He's the only one who can confirm everything." A wave of nausea washed over Alara. Casper Reed, a name whispered in hushed tones, a phantom lurking in the shadows of this conspiracy. Finding him felt like searching for a ghost. Yet, the weight of the truth, the burden of this impossible secret, spurred her on. "But what if we're wrong?" Alara finally said, her voice barely audible above the frantic rhythm of her heart. Anna placed a comforting hand on her arm, her touch surprisingly firm. "We can't afford to be. Not when it involves a man like Arthur Morrison. This isn't just about uncovering a secret anymore, Alara. It's about protecting innocent lives, possibly our own." The implication hung heavy in the air, the unspoken threat a tangible presence in the room. The quiet hum of the city outside seemed to fade, replaced by the thrumming intensity of their shared purpose. The hunt had begun. The chipped paint of Alara's desk felt rough beneath her fingertips, a tactile echo of the turmoil churning within. The scent of old paper and dust, usually a comforting balm, now felt suffocating. Anna's words, sharp and urgent, replayed in her mind. Casper Reed, the missing piece. The following days blurred into a frantic search. Alara delved deeper into the hospital archives, sifting through decades-old files, the musty smell clinging to her clothes like a second skin. She unearthed a faded photograph, a young Dr. Albright, his smile strained, flanked by two women with expectant glows. One was clearly the mother of Liam Morrison. The other bore a striking resemblance to Isabella Avignon's mother, though younger. The third woman remained elusive. "He's a ghost," Alara murmured, the words escaping in a breathy whisper, her reflection a pale shadow in the dusty window. The weight of the secret, the potential consequences, pressed down on her like a physical burden. She felt the familiar thrum of anxiety, a tight coil in her chest. The thought of confronting Arthur Morrison, a man whose power was both legendary and terrifying, filled her with a dread that transcended logic. A sharp rap on her apartment door startled her. Anna stood there, her usually bright eyes shadowed with concern, her normally vibrant scarf muted in color. "I found something," she announced, her voice low and serious. "An address, a secluded property outside the city. It's registered to Casper Reed." The address felt like a lifeline, yet a sudden, icy wave of fear washed over Alara. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret anymore. It was about venturing into the heart of a predator's den. The risks felt impossibly high, but the hope, however fragile, was a flickering candle in the growing darkness. "We leave at dawn," Alara said, her voice steadier than she felt. The tremor in her hands was barely perceptible, but the determination in her eyes burned bright. The game had changed. The hunt was no longer a mere investigation. It was a fight for survival. The old photograph felt brittle in Alara's trembling hand. Dr. Albright's forced smile mocked her, the two expectant mothers radiating a fragile happiness that felt cruelly ironic now. The air in the archive hung thick with the scent of decay and the ghosts of untold stories. Outside, the city hummed with oblivious life, a stark contrast to the suffocating weight of the secret she held. A single tear traced a path through the dust motes dancing in the weak sunlight. Anna's arrival was a jolt, a sudden intrusion into her solitary grief. Anna's presence, usually a vibrant splash of color, felt muted, her usual optimism dimmed. "Casper Reed's address," Anna said, her voice a low murmur. "A secluded property, it's chillingly isolated." Alara felt a tremor run through her, a blend of fear and a desperate hope. "We go at dawn," she whispered, her voice catching on the unspoken dread. The thought of confronting the unknown, of facing the consequences of their actions, sent a fresh wave of icy fear through her. Yet, the fragile flame of hope refused to be extinguished. The address wasn't just a location. It was a potential key to unlocking a truth that threatened to shatter everything. The drive was long, the landscape shifting from urban sprawl to stark, unforgiving countryside. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the tires and the occasional sigh. Anna's worry was palpable, a silent pressure in the confined space. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange, reflecting Alara's inner turmoil. The Reed property was a Gothic monstrosity, perched on a windswept hill overlooking a desolate valley. The house seemed to brood, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. The air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, the silence broken only by the mournful cry of a distant hawk. This wasn't just a house. It was a cage, and Caspar Reed was the bird trapped inside. As they approached the imposing front door, Alara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was it, the culmination of weeks of painstaking research, sleepless nights, and mounting fear. The game had changed. They weren't just investigators anymore. They were trespassers, intruders in a world governed by power and secrets. The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable tension that hummed between them. This wasn't merely a confrontation. It was a desperate gamble, a leap into the unknown, fueled by a fragile hope for truth and the unshakable bond of friendship. The chipped paint of Anna's apartment felt oddly comforting. The scent of old books and brewing coffee hung in the air, a stark contrast to the sterile, antiseptic smell of the hospital archives. Alara, usually precise and controlled, nervously twisted a strand of her hair. "It's impossible," she breathed, pushing the folder of birth certificates across the worn kitchen table. The identical dates stared back at them, a silent accusation. Anna, ever the pragmatist, pushed aside her half-finished cup of coffee. Impossible according to whom? The medical establishment that's been silencing whistleblowers for decades? Alara, this is bigger than you think. Her voice held a tremor of excitement, a thrilling edge that belied her calm exterior. Alara's apprehension warred with a burgeoning hope. 3 children, born on the same day, to 3 vastly different families, the Morrisons, the Avignons, and the Reeds. They were all connected to the same fertility clinic, a clinic Arthur Morrison himself helped fund. The weight of the secret pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on their faces, highlighting the gravity of their situation. The comfortable familiarity of Anna's apartment felt fragile, a temporary refuge before the storm. "What do we do?" Anna asked, her voice barely a whisper, the question hanging in the air like unspoken fear. Alara met Anna's gaze, the fear mirroring in her own eyes. "We have to tell someone," she said, her voice trembling. "But who can we trust? Morrison controls everything." The thought of exposing the truth, of confronting Morrison's power, sent a fresh wave of fear through her. But the hope that burned within her, a fierce flame against the encroaching darkness, was stronger. They had to try. The lives of 3 people and perhaps more depended on it. The coffee grew cold, forgotten amidst the weight of their shared burden. The night stretched before them, long and uncertain, filled with the promise of danger and the fragile hope of revelation. The city lights outside cast a pale glow through the window, a silent witness to their growing resolve. The chipped mug warmed Anna's hands, a small comfort against the chill seeping from the November air outside. Alara, usually a picture of composure, fidgeted, her perfectly manicured nails tracing patterns on the worn wooden table. The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows, highlighting the stark lines of worry etched onto her face. The scent of old paper and impending storm hung heavy in the air. "Arthur Morrison," Anna murmured, the name a weight on her tongue. She traced the outline of a half-eaten croissant with a fingertip, its buttery scent doing little to alleviate the knot in her stomach. "He's a titan, Alara. This is a Goliath situation." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the birth certificates. The identical dates, a cruel joke played by fate or something far more sinister, leaped out at her. 3 children, 3 different mothers, all linked to the same clinic. And the Reed family, they're practically ghosts. A shudder ran through her, a mixture of fear and fascination. Anna leaned forward, her usual journalistic skepticism tempered by a rising unease. "The clinic, it's been shut down for years," a hushed-up scandal whispered about in hushed tones. "But there's nothing concrete, no hard evidence." She sighed, pushing the croissant aside. "This isn't just about a medical anomaly, Alara. This is about power, about a cover-up that reaches the highest echelons." Alara swallowed, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. I found fragments, hints of experimental procedures, advanced reproductive technologies, things that shouldn't exist. Things Morrison would have paid handsomely to keep buried. She looked at Anna, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. I've seen glimpses of the 3 children now. Liam Morrison, the ruthless heir, Isabella Avignon, the haunted artist, and Caspar Reed, a recluse, almost mythical in his absence. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the crackling of the candle and the distant city hum. The weight of the secret pressed down on them, suffocating. The comfortable familiarity of Anna's apartment felt fragile, a temporary haven before the tempest. The potential risks loomed large, casting long, ominous shadows over their fragile hope. The coffee had grown cold, forgotten in the face of the monumental task before them. The night stretched before them, a long and arduous journey filled with uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of bringing down an empire. The city lights outside cast a pale glow, a silent witness to the burgeoning resolve hardening in their eyes. The game had begun. Anna's apartment, usually a haven of comforting clutter, felt claustrophobic. The scent of wood smoke from the fireplace battled with the lingering aroma of Alara's fear, a sharp, metallic tang. Alara traced the rim of her chipped teacup, the porcelain cold against her trembling fingers. Liam, he's cold, Anna. Distant, like he's perpetually braced for a blow. Anna nodded, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames. And Isabella? The artist. Haunted, Alara whispered, her voice catching. Lost in a labyrinth of her own making. Her paintings, they scream of a buried sorrow, a yearning for something she can't name. The weight of their shared secret pressed down, a physical burden. And Caspar? Anna asked, the question hanging in the air like a fragile butterfly. Alara shook her head, a shiver running down her spine. He's a ghost, a whisper in the wind, but the clues point to him being the key. He's the missing piece. The fire crackled, mirroring the unsettling feeling in Alara's gut. The city lights outside, usually a comforting spectacle, now seemed to mock their vulnerability. Anna rose, pacing the small space, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. We need to tread carefully. Morrison's reach is vast. He won't hesitate to silence us. The concern in her voice was palpable, laced with a steely resolve. Alara met her gaze, her own apprehension warring with a newfound determination. We owe it to them, Anna. To Liam, Isabella, Caspar, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The candlelight glinted off her determined eyes, illuminating a strength that belied her tremulous hands. The night was long, the road ahead perilous, but the fire of their shared purpose burned bright against the encroaching darkness. The first step towards unveiling the secret had been taken. The next would be far more perilous. The scent of old paper and dust clung to Alara as she left Anna's apartment, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked window. Anna's words echoed Morrison's reach is vast, a chilling reminder of the danger they were in. The weight of their secret pressed down, heavier than the damp chill seeping into her bones. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a worn photograph, the image of 3 newborns blurred, but their identical birth dates starkly clear. Liam, Isabella, Caspar. 3 lives intertwined, unknowingly, by a web of deceit spun by Arthur Morrison. The following days were a blur of hushed phone calls, furtive meetings in dimly lit cafes, and the relentless tapping of keyboard keys as Anna pursued the fertility clinic's trail. Alara, meanwhile, delved deeper into the hospital archives, uncovering fragmented medical notes detailing experimental procedures, hushed whispers of a groundbreaking, yet ethically dubious fertility breakthrough. The more she learned, the more certain she became of the immense power and influence Arthur Morrison wielded, his shadowy hand manipulating events, silencing voices, weaving a tapestry of lies. One evening, a chilling discovery surfaced, a letter from the now-deceased doctor involved in the procedure, a confession laced with regret and fear. The doctor had been coerced into silence, his life threatened if he revealed the truth about the 3 babies, engineered with unprecedented genetic manipulation. The letter was addressed to someone named Elias, a name that resonated with a faint memory, a whispered comment Anna had made about a possible connection to the Reed family. The pieces were falling into place, yet the fear intensified. Alara felt the cold breath of Arthur Morrison's power on the back of her neck, a constant reminder of the potential consequences. She looked at the photograph again, seeing not just newborns, but 3 young adults each navigating a life profoundly impacted by a lie. They deserved the truth no matter the cost. Their shared destiny, however impossible, was a story that needed to be told. The risks were immense, but the moral imperative was even greater. The quiet archivist had become a warrior, armed with truth and fueled by the injustice she uncovered. Liam Morrison stared at the swirling coffee in his mug, the bitter taste mirroring the turmoil in his gut. The mahogany desk in his minimalist office felt cold beneath his fingertips, a stark contrast to the simmering anger that pulsed within him. His father, Arthur, a titan of industry, a man who built his empire on ruthlessness, had always been a cipher. Liam had learned to navigate a life defined by carefully controlled emotions, polite silences, and the unspoken expectations of privilege. Now, a gnawing unease, a disquiet he couldn't ignore, gnawed at him. He'd inherited Arthur's steely gaze, his sharp jawline, but not his cold heart. A recent, inexplicable anxiety had taken root, a feeling of displacement, of being wrong, a stranger in his own life. His phone buzzed, a jarring interruption. It was Isabella Avignon, an artist he'd met at a charity gala. A chance encounter that had sparked an unexpected connection. Her voice, husky and vibrant, filled the room. "Liam? I found something," she said, her words clipped with urgency. "An old family photograph. 3 babies, identical. It's unsettling." Liam felt a chill despite the warmth of his office. 3 babies. The echo of Alara's revelation from the hushed meeting weeks ago resurfaced. He'd dismissed it then, chalked it up to the archivist's overactive imagination. But Isabella's voice, laced with a tremor he couldn't mistake, shattered his carefully constructed composure. "What are you talking about, Isabella?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of his inner chaos. "It's complicated," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "The dates match the birth certificates Alara mentioned. Mine, yours, and someone else's. A Reed." Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the hum of the city outside. The image of 3 newborns, their faces blurred yet unmistakably similar, flashed in his mind. A terrifying thought took root. A shared secret, a hidden past he never knew existed, was calling to him. The comfortable, predictable narrative of his life was crumbling, replaced by a terrifying uncertainty. His carefully constructed world, built on the foundation of his father's power and influence, felt like it was built on sand. He felt adrift, a solitary ship in an uncharted sea. The anger he felt wasn't directed at his father anymore. It was directed at the unknown, at the lies that had shaped his entire life. Isabella traced the faded image with a trembling fingertip, the sepia-toned photograph crackling softly under her touch. 3 infants, impossibly alike, stared back from the brittle paper. The air in her cramped studio, usually alive with the scent of turpentine and linseed oil, felt thick with a suffocating dread. Liam's voice, tight with controlled anxiety, echoed in her ears from their earlier call. "The dates, they match," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic tick-tock of an old grandfather clock. The clock, a family heirloom, seemed to mock her with its steady march of time, a time she now understood was far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. A wave of nausea rolled over her. The vibrant colors of her half-finished canvas seemed to blur, the strokes of paint suddenly clumsy and meaningless. This wasn't just a historical anomaly. It was a seismic shift in her understanding of herself, her family, her entire life. She reread the text message from Alara, the archivist, a chillingly precise summary of the birth certificates. Identical birth dates, 3 different mothers, 3 elite families. The Morrison, Avignon, and read names, etched in elegant script, felt like a mocking indictment. Alara's message ended with a simple, terrifying question: what if it's not a coincidence? Isabella shivered, pulling a worn cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The Parisian evening was growing colder, the chill seeping into her bones. The thought of Caspar Reed, the elusive third party, sent a fresh wave of unease through her. She'd only ever heard whispers, a reclusive figure, shrouded in mystery, a ghost haunting the edges of her fragmented family history. Now, this photograph, this impossible echo of shared infancy, connected them all irrevocably. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her, crushing the breath from her lungs. She was an Avignon, wasn't she? Or was she something else entirely? The identity she'd painstakingly constructed, the life she'd lived, felt flimsy, a house of cards threatened by the wind. Tears pricked at her eyes, blurring the already indistinct features of the three babies. The question wasn't just what was the truth, but who was she? Really? The answer, she knew, lay buried somewhere in the tangled threads of this unsettling mystery. The Parisian twilight painted the studio in hues of amethyst and rose. Isabella, her fingers stained with oil paint, stared at the photograph, its faded sepia tones mirroring the weariness in her heart. The three babies, identical yet strangely different, mocked her with their serene innocence. A chill, deeper than the autumn evening's bite, settled in her bones. Liam's voice, raw with apprehension, replayed in her mind. The dates, they match. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. She traced the line of one infant's tiny hand, a mirror image of her own. Was this a coincidence? A cruel joke of fate? Or something far more sinister? A sob escaped her lips, a choked sound lost in the vastness of the studio. The scent of turpentine, usually comforting, now felt acrid, a bitter reminder of the shattered illusion of her life. The grandfather clock ticked relentlessly, each beat a hammer blow against her fragile composure. Her phone buzzed, a text message from Alara. Short, blunt sentences. Further investigation confirms. Fertility clinic, Dr. Albright. Cover up. The name felt like a brand, searing a fresh wound into her already fractured soul. She clutched the photograph, the paper crinkling like dried leaves under her trembling fingers. Suddenly, the vibrant chaos of her canvases seemed a mocking contrast to the stark reality of her situation. She was unraveling, the carefully constructed tapestry of her identity dissolving thread by thread. The thought of Caspar Reed, a phantom in the periphery of her memory, sent a fresh shiver down her spine. He was the missing piece, the elusive third part of this impossible equation. But what did it all mean? What was the truth hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed lies and forgotten secrets? The question hung in the air, as heavy and inescapable as the Parisian night. Sleep, she knew, wouldn't come easily tonight. The weight of the unknown, of the shattering truth waiting to be unearthed, was a burden too heavy to bear alone. Liam Morrison stared at the sleek, obsidian surface of his city view balcony, the rain blurring the glittering expanse of London below. The chill seeped into his bones, mirroring the icy dread that had taken root in his heart since Alara's cryptic message. He'd spent the last 3 days in a haze of disbelief, the elegant facade of his life cracking under the weight of a truth too monstrous to comprehend. His perfectly tailored suit felt like a suffocating cage. The text had been simple: identical birth dates, 3 families, advanced reproductive technology. Unofficial research suggests a cover-up. His carefully constructed world, built on foundations of privilege and assumed certainty, had crumbled into dust. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, the movement jarring him from his numb stupor. The scent of rain mingled with the faint perfume of his wife, a phantom reminder of a life that might not be his own. He thought of Isabella, her vibrant spirit dimmed by the shadow of uncertainty, and a sharp pang of guilt stabbed at him. Their recent strained silences felt pregnant with unspoken anxieties, a direct result of the suffocating revelation. The phone buzzed again, a jarring sound against the rhythmic drumming of the rain. It was Isabella. Liam. Her voice, usually bright and effervescent, was tight with tension. I found something. An old photo album. My mother. She hid it. A shaky breath followed. 3 babies. Identical. In it. A cold sweat slicked his palms. He could almost feel the weight of the photograph, the chilling echo of Alara's words. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something far bigger, far more sinister. The casual cruelty of wealth and power was slowly unfurling before him. Isabella, he began, his voice barely a whisper. We need to talk. Tonight. The weight of the unknown hung heavy between them, a shared burden they had to face. Together, whatever the terrifying consequences may be. The rain continued its relentless assault, mirroring the storm brewing within him. He had to understand, he had to confront this monstrous truth, not only for himself, but for Isabella, for Casper, and for the future he had never truly known. His carefully constructed world was shattering, and he could only hope that from the ruins of his comfortable lies, a new, more authentic life could be born. Anna's cramped apartment, smelling faintly of old books and brewing coffee, felt a world away from Liam's sterile penthouse. Rain lashed against the window panes, a frantic counterpoint to the hushed urgency in the air. Isabella, her usually vibrant eyes shadowed with worry, clutched a worn photo album. The image within 3 identical infants swaddled in hospital blankets was both heartbreaking and terrifying. They look exactly alike, Isabella whispered, her voice trembling. The album felt heavy in her hands, a physical manifestation of the weight of the secret it held. Liam nodded, the chill that had settled in his bones refusing to thaw. He ran a hand over his stubbled jaw, the rough texture a small comfort against the overwhelming sense of disorientation. Alara was right. This isn't just a coincidence. This is a conspiracy. Anna, ever the pragmatist, pushed back a stray strand of hair. We need evidence, concrete proof, the clinic's records, the doctor's notes, anything that can corroborate what we've seen. The intensity in her gaze burned, a fierce determination battling against her growing unease. Isabella looked from Anna to Liam, her gaze searching. My mother, she always felt different, like she was hiding something, a secret shame. Now I understand. Tears welled in her eyes, a mix of sorrow and dawning understanding. She never spoke of her past, her family. She painted, obsessively, but the paintings were always a vague, abstract. Like she was trying to capture a feeling, a memory, she couldn't quite grasp. Liam's heart ached for her. He saw a reflection of his own confusion, his own desperate search for meaning in a life that now felt utterly foreign. He reached out, his touch tentative, covering her hand. We'll find out. Together. We'll uncover the truth, no matter the cost. His voice was low, a promise both to her and himself. The weight of shared uncertainty bound them together, a fragile yet powerful connection forging in the crucible of their shared secret. The rain continued its relentless assault, but within the small apartment, a quiet resolve had begun to bloom. The fight had begun. The sterile scent of antiseptic still clung to Liam despite the shower. He stared at his reflection, a stranger looking back, haunted eyes, shadowed cheeks. Isabella's words echoed in his ears. Asterisk, my mother. She always felt different. Asterisk, he understood. That same unease, that same gnawing sense of displacement, had plagued him his entire life. Anna's investigation had hit a wall. The fertility clinic, Genesis Life, was a fortress of silence, its records meticulously scrubbed clean. Yet, a single document, a fragment of a discarded file Alara had found, hinted at a rogue doctor, Dr. Albright, and a series of experimental procedures, codenamed Project Chimera. The name sent a shiver down Liam's spine. Chimera, a mythical creature, a composite of disparate beings. He picked up his phone, the cool glass a stark contrast to the tremor in his hand. He needed answers, needed to break through the carefully constructed walls of his family's meticulously crafted lies. He dialed his father's number, the digits a cold, hard weight in his palm. The ringing tone was a relentless drumbeat against the silence in his luxurious apartment. His opulent surroundings mocked him, a gilded cage he'd never realized he was trapped in. The call went to voicemail. Arthur Morrison's voice, crisp and controlled, filled the room. A voice Liam hadn't truly heard, hadn't truly felt, until now. This wasn't the father he knew. This was a stranger. The ice in his father's voice was now a sharp, cutting wind. Isabella's call came soon after. Her voice, usually bright and full of life, was laced with exhaustion. "I found something," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "An old sketchbook, my mother's. There's a recurring motif, 3 intertwined figures, almost fetal, and a date. The same date as our birth certificates." The connection slammed into Liam with the force of a physical blow. 3 figures, 3 intertwined lives, 3 secrets. The fragmented pieces of his own fractured identity began to coalesce, forming a terrifying, yet strangely compelling whole. He felt a strange pull, a gravitational force drawing him toward Isabella, toward the unknown, toward the terrifying truth. The rain outside mirrored the storm raging within him. He needed to see Isabella. He needed to understand. He needed to know who he truly was. The Parisian bistro hummed with a low thrum of conversation, the scent of rich coffee and warm bread mingling with the crisp autumn air. Isabella, her usually vibrant eyes shadowed with exhaustion, stirred her café au lait, the spoon clinking a discordant note against the delicate china. Across the small table, Anna, her journalist's notepad open, watched her friend with concern. "The sketchbook," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle murmur of the cafe. "It's unsettling. The recurring motif, those 3 figures intertwined. It feels preordained." She traced a trembling finger across the worn surface of a photograph, a faded image of a young woman with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. Her mother. Anna leaned forward, her gaze intense. "And the date? The same as your birth certificate, Liam's and Casper's?" Isabella nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "It's like we were planned, designed, like pieces of some puzzle." The weight of the revelation settled heavily between them, the silence punctuated only by the clinking of cups and the low hum of the city outside. "But why?" Anna asked, her voice hushed, her usual sharp wit muted by the gravity of the situation. "Why would anyone do this? What was the purpose?" Isabella shrugged, a gesture of helpless resignation. "I don't know, but I feel a pull, Anna. A connection to Liam, to Casper, that transcends anything I've ever experienced. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." The rain outside intensified, drumming a frantic rhythm against the cafe windows. The storm mirrored the turmoil brewing within Isabella, a tempest of fear, confusion, and a burgeoning sense of belonging she couldn't quite comprehend. The weight of the secret, the weight of the shared past, pressed down on her, a crushing burden she carried alone, until now. She looked at Anna, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. Maybe, just maybe, together they could unravel this impossible truth. The future, once a terrifying unknown, now held the promise, however uncertain, of discovery. The fluorescent lights of the fertility clinic hummed, a sterile counterpoint to the chaos in Anna's mind. Dust motes danced in the pale light, illuminating the rows of archived files. The air, thick with the scent of old paper and disinfectant, felt suffocating. She ran a trembling hand over a file, its label barely legible, Project Chimera. A chill snaked down her spine. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a scientific abomination. Across town, Alara sat hunched over more documents, the rhythmic scratch of her pen a lonely soundtrack to her late-night vigil. The faded ink bled onto the brittle paper, revealing a doctor's scrawling signature, Dr. Elias Thorne. His name was synonymous with groundbreaking research, but the documents hinted at a darker side, a reckless ambition masked by professional prestige. A bitter taste filled her mouth. Thorne's notes spoke of risks, of ethical compromises, of silencing those who knew too much. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just about 3 children. It was about a vast, sinister conspiracy. The weight of it threatened to crush her. The next morning, Anna called Alara, her voice tight with urgency. "I found it. Thorne's research is beyond anything I could have imagined. Gene editing, experimental procedures. They were creating children, Alara. Designing them." Silence hung heavy between them, broken only by Anna's ragged breaths. "This is bigger than we thought," Alara whispered, the implications dawning on her with chilling clarity. The tremor in her voice betrayed the fear that coiled in her stomach. The fight was far from over. The truth was closer, but so was the danger. Liam stared at the antique silver locket, its surface cool against his fingertips. He'd found it tucked away in his grandmother's dusty attic, a forgotten relic amongst moth-eaten shawls and chipped porcelain dolls. Inside, a faded photograph. 3 infants, impossibly alike, swaddled in identical blankets. A shiver, cold and unsettling, traced its path down his spine. It was a feeling he couldn't quite name, a disquieting familiarity that clung to him like a second skin. He knew, instinctively, that these babies were connected to him, to the gnawing unease that had plagued him since childhood. He felt a tremor in his hands, a subtle but powerful physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil consuming him. Across town, Isabella traced the lines of a charcoal sketch, her brow furrowed in concentration. The model, a young woman with eyes that mirrored her own haunted gaze, remained stubbornly elusive. Frustration simmered beneath her skin, a familiar ache that mirrored the constant feeling of being adrift, of lacking a sense of belonging. The sketch, intended to capture her own inner turmoil, seemed to mock her, its lines as tangled and unresolved as her own life. The locket, a gift from her estranged mother, lay heavy in her pocket, a constant reminder of the unanswered questions that echoed within her soul. Its weight was a physical manifestation of the burden of her unspoken anxieties. Meanwhile, Casper, secluded in his remote cabin, felt a sudden, sharp pang of recognition upon seeing a news report of a fertility clinic scandal. The grainy image of Dr. Elias Thorne flashed across the screen, a face he'd long since buried in the recesses of his memory, yet one that now stirred a painful familiarity. The flickering light of the old television seemed to highlight the years of isolation he'd willingly embraced, a self-imposed exile designed to keep his past buried. Yet, the news report, with its whispered accusations and shadowy allusions, stirred something deep within his normally placid soul. The familiar dull ache of loneliness suddenly intensified, sharp and pointed, mirroring the unsettling resurgence of memories he'd so meticulously suppressed. He felt a desperate, almost primal urge to connect, to find answers, to finally understand the puzzle of his existence. The 3, unknowingly, were on the verge of a convergence, their separate paths intertwined by a shared secret, a secret that held the key to unlocking not only their past, but their futures. The weight of the past, once a muted hum in the background, now roared to life, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be understood. The rain lashed against the windows of Anna's cramped apartment, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. Alara, her face etched with worry, nervously paced. "The doctor's notes. They're coded, Anna, but I think I've cracked some of it. Experimental procedures, multiple embryos, 3 distinct sets of parents." Anna, usually sharp and cynical, was unusually subdued. The weight of Alara's revelations had settled heavily on her shoulders. "This is bigger than we thought, Alara. This isn't just a fertility clinic scandal. It's a violation of everything we believe in." She ran a hand through her already messy hair, the exhaustion etched deep into her eyes. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, highlighting the worry lines on her face. The scent of old paper and brewing coffee hung heavy in the air. Alara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. And the coincidences, Liam's sudden obsession with his family history, Isabella's desperate search for connection, Casper's withdrawal. It's all pointing to this. She pushed a crumpled photograph across the small table, the image blurred but unmistakable. 3 babies, identical, serene in their swaddling blankets. The sheer impossibility of it struck them both anew. "This isn't just a story, Alara," Anna breathed, her voice filled with a dawning dread. "This is a bomb." The weight of their discovery pressed down on them, a suffocating blanket of fear and responsibility. The gentle patter of the rain was now a relentless drumming, a counterpoint to the racing thoughts in their minds. A new understanding dawned between them, silent, profound, and utterly terrifying. They were on the verge of uncovering a truth that could shatter worlds. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the glass, a relentless soundtrack to the unfolding drama. The scent of rain and the faint aroma of the old photo filled their senses as they each absorbed the magnitude of what they held in their hands. A future of turmoil stretched before them, a labyrinth of deception and revelation that promised to expose not only a medical conspiracy, but something much more profound. Liam stared at the antique silver locket, its surface cool against his fingertips. The faint scent of lavender, a ghost of a memory, clung to the tarnished metal. Inside, a miniature portrait. A woman with eyes like storm clouds and a smile that hinted at untold sadness. His grandmother, a woman he barely knew, yet whose image haunted his dreams. The unease that had gnawed at him for months intensified, a knot tightening in his chest. He'd dismissed it as inherited Morrison ruthlessness, a family trait he'd always despised. Now, Alara's revelations cast a chilling new light on this inherited unease. Felt familial. Isabella, meanwhile, sat hunched over her easel, the vibrant colors on her palette mocking the gray emptiness she felt inside. Her latest painting, a swirling vortex of blues and blacks, mirrored the turmoil in her soul. A whispered conversation overheard at her aunt's, a cryptic comment about a secret kept for decades, echoed in her ears, stirring a desperate longing for a past she couldn't quite grasp. The brush slipped in her hand, a tear splashing onto the canvas, blurring the already chaotic landscape. She needed answers. Her art, once a vibrant expression of her soul, now felt like a desperate attempt to paint her way to understanding. Casper, secluded in his remote cottage, felt the familiar chill of isolation despite the crackling fire in the hearth. The rhythmic tick-tock of an old grandfather clock was the only sound besides the wind whistling through the cracks in the stone walls. A worn photograph, discovered in a dusty trunk, showed 3 identical babies. A jolt of recognition, a flicker of something long dormant, stirred within him. He traced the face of one of the babies, a mirror image of himself staring back. A strange sense of belonging, of connection, pulsed through him, a fragile counterpoint to his lifelong solitude. A tremor ran through him, a physical manifestation of the burgeoning revelation. He wasn't alone. Not truly. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth clung to Casper as he stared at the photograph, its faded colors mirroring the grayness settling in his soul. The 3 identical babies, their tiny fists clenched, seemed to reach out across the decades, tugging at something deep within him. A choked sob escaped his lips, a sound he hadn't heard in years. Loneliness, a constant companion, felt momentarily displaced by a burgeoning sense of belonging? Impossible. Meanwhile, in a bustling Parisian cafe, Isabella nervously stirred her café au lait, the swirling cream mirroring the chaos in her mind. The cryptic comment from her aunt replayed relentlessly, a secret kept for decades, a sacrifice. Her hand trembled as she pulled out a worn sketchbook, its pages filled with self-portraits, each a reflection of her inner turmoil, a testament to the gnawing unease that had become her constant companion. She traced the sharp lines of her own face, a face that felt both familiar and utterly alien. Across the city, in a lavishly appointed office overlooking Hyde Park, Liam paced restlessly. The antique silver locket, cold and heavy in his pocket, pulsed with a silent energy. He'd inherited the Morrison ruthlessness he'd always believed. But Alara's words, 3 children, a fertility clinic scandal, a cover-up, had shattered his carefully constructed reality. He slammed his fist on the mahogany desk, the sharp crack echoing the turmoil within him. Damnation, he muttered. The word a low growl of frustrated anger. The coldness he'd always associated with his family felt different now. It was a coldness born not of strength, but of a terrifying secret. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The truth is closer than you think. A chill snaked down his spine. He felt watched, hunted. The game had begun. The mahogany desk felt cold beneath Liam's clenched fists. The scent of old leather and polished wood did little to soothe the turmoil churning within him. His father, Arthur Morrison, sat opposite. His face a mask of controlled fury. The usual icy gleam in his eyes replaced by a flicker of something else. Fear? Liam had never seen it before. You think you know something, Liam? Arthur's voice, usually a low rumble of command, was tight with barely suppressed rage. Some archivist's fantasy? It's not a fantasy, father. 3 birth certificates. Same day. Different mothers. Elite families. Liam's voice, though strained, held a steely resolve. The antique silver locket, a constant weight in his pocket, seemed to pulse with a frantic energy. Arthur leaned forward, his gaze piercing. There are things you don't understand, things you shouldn't meddle in, like the fact that I might not be who you say I am? The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations and a lifetime of unanswered questions. A knot of fear twisted in Liam's stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination to uncover the truth. Arthur sighed, a sound like air escaping a punctured lung. There was an experiment, a mistake. Years ago, it was meant to remain buried. His voice was low, almost a whisper, betraying the carefully constructed facade of power. A mistake, Liam echoed, his voice laced with disbelief. A mistake that cost me my true identity? The weight of the years of carefully cultivated identity, began to crumble under the weight of the revelation. He felt a sudden dizziness, the room tilting slightly on its axis. Arthur rose, his shadow falling across Liam like a shroud. It was for your own good. Your mother, she couldn't. His voice broke, the carefully constructed wall finally crumbling. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. Liam saw vulnerability in his father for the first time. It was terrifying and strangely heartbreaking. What happened to her? Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question, years in the making, hung suspended between them, a silent testament to the years of unspoken pain and buried secrets. The air in the room thickened, heavy with unspoken emotions, and the ghosts of a past Liam was only beginning to comprehend. The confrontation had only just begun, and the truth remained stubbornly elusive. The heavy oak door creaked shut behind Liam, leaving him alone in the echoing silence of his father's study. The air, thick with the scent of aged mahogany and pipe tobacco, felt suffocating. Arthur's confession hung between them, a fragile bridge across a chasm of years. Liam ran a hand through his hair, the polished wood of the desk cold beneath his palm. He saw the single tear, a stark contradiction to the iron-willed man he'd always known. The vulnerability was unsettling, a crack in the impenetrable fortress of Arthur Morrison. You said it was a mistake, Liam repeated, his voice low, searching. The antique silver locket, a constant reminder of his unknown past, felt heavier now, a lead weight against his chest. Arthur avoided his gaze, his fingers tracing patterns on the worn leather of his desk. It was a scientific endeavor, a risky one. Your mother, she volunteered. The words were clipped, hesitant, each syllable a painful admission. Volunteered. Liam's voice rose, a sharp edge cutting through the silence. She volunteered to have me? The thought struck him with the force of a physical blow. He pictured his mother, a woman he barely knew, a ghost in old photographs, willingly participating in something so secretive, so potentially dangerous. The pain was raw, visceral. Arthur nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly. She wanted a child. She couldn't, naturally. He looked up, his eyes filled with a sorrow Liam had never witnessed before. It was a gamble, a chance to... He trailed off, unable to articulate the desperate hope that had driven him. A bitter laugh escaped Liam's lips. A gamble with my life? The anger flared, hot and immediate, but beneath it, a deeper, colder fear took root. Fear of the unknown, of the potential truth of the life he might have lived. This wasn't just about uncovering a family secret. It was about questioning his entire identity, his very existence. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Each tick a relentless reminder of the time lost, the truth concealed. The fragmented confession left Liam reeling, the pieces of the puzzle scattered, the image of his family, his life, shattered beyond repair. He was adrift, lost in a sea of unanswered questions. His only anchor the unwavering determination to find the answers, no matter the cost. The confrontation was far from over. It had only just begun to unearth the buried truth. The Parisian atelier hummed with a low, rhythmic thrum of Isabella's brushstrokes against canvas. Sunlight filtered through the tall, arched windows, painted dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of linseed oil and turpentine hung heavy, a familiar comfort. Yet today the familiar felt alien. The vibrant colors on her palette seemed muted, reflecting the turmoil within. A half-finished portrait of a laughing child stared back at her, its cheerful expression mocking her inner chaos. A knock echoed, hesitant. Isabella? Her aunt, Genevieve, her voice laced with concern. Isabella sighed, wiping a stray tear with the back of her hand. Come in, Tante. Genevieve entered, her face etched with worry. Your mother. She's been asking about you. Again. Isabella's shoulders slumped. Her mother, a woman shrouded in a perpetual melancholic haze, had become increasingly erratic since the cryptic phone call. A whisper of a secret, a long-forgotten truth. Tell her I'm busy. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Isabella, Genevieve's voice softened. There's something I overheard my mother mentioning years ago. Something about a clinic, a scandal, a child. Her voice trailed off, hesitant, the weight of unspoken words heavy in the air. Isabella's heart pounded. A clinic? A scandal? The pieces of the puzzle, scattered and fragmented, began to coalesce into a terrifying, incomplete picture. A chill snaked down her spine, despite the warmth of the Parisian sun. What kind of scandal, Tante? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic tick-tock of a grandfather clock in the corner. Genevieve leaned closer, her voice a hushed conspiratorial murmur. It involved experimental procedures, advanced reproductive technologies. They said some children were different. Her gaze met Isabella's, a mixture of fear and pity in her eyes. They said some were impossible. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Impossible. The very word resonated with Isabella's own feelings of being an outsider, a stranger in her own life, a ghost haunting her own family history. The half-finished portrait of the laughing child felt like a cruel mockery of her own uncertain identity. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the frantic beating of Isabella's heart, a frantic drum against the backdrop of a burgeoning, terrifying truth. The mahogany desk, polished to a high sheen, gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of Arthur Morrison's office. Liam sat opposite his father, the scent of old leather and expensive cigars filling the air, a suffocating perfume of power and age. He felt a tremor of fear, a cold sweat prickling his skin despite the room's comfortable temperature. Arthur, his face etched with the harsh lines of a life lived ruthlessly, steepled his fingers, his gaze unwavering. You've been asking questions, Liam, Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Liam swallowed, the lump in his throat refusing to budge. I have. About your birth, Arthur continued, his eyes like chips of ice. He leaned forward, the movement a subtle shift in power, the scent of his cologne sharp, almost metallic, filling the air. There are things you don't understand. Then explain them, Liam demanded, his voice cracking slightly, But the fear was fading, replaced by a simmering anger. He felt a surge of defiance, a desperate need for the truth. The years of unease, the gnawing questions, were pushing him to the brink. Arthur sighed, a theatrical gesture that seemed more performance than genuine remorse. Your mother, she was fragile. She needed special care. There were complications. He paused, the silence punctuated by the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, a relentless reminder of time's inexorable march. Complicated how? Liam pressed, his voice firm, a counterpoint to his father's calculated ambiguity. He watched Arthur carefully, searching for a flicker of honesty in the icy depths of his eyes. He saw nothing but a carefully constructed wall of denial. Arthur leaned back, his gaze distant, lost in memories Liam couldn't see. It involved a procedure, experimental. It wasn't perfect. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, each syllable weighted with a carefully calibrated mix of guilt and self-preservation. He revealed a fragment of the truth, carefully leaving the most damaging parts hidden in the shadows. A procedure? Liam repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He felt a deep sense of betrayal, a gnawing feeling that something vast and terrible had been concealed from him his entire life. The truth, whatever that might be, felt impossibly distant, yet tantalizingly close. The conversation hung suspended, heavy with unspoken truths and the weight of a family legacy built on lies. The scent of linseed oil and turpentine hung heavy in Isabella's cramped studio, a familiar comfort amidst the chaos of her life. Sunlight, fractured by the grimy window panes, illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, mirroring the turmoil within her. Brushes lay scattered, stiff with dried paint, a testament to her recent creative drought. A half-finished canvas, depicting a distorted cityscape, mocked her from the easel. It felt as though the city itself reflected the fractured pieces of her own identity. A crumpled photograph lay on her work table, a faded image of her mother, young and radiant, a smile that felt both familiar and alien. The memory of her mother's stories, fragmented and elusive, haunted her. Whispers from aging aunts and uncles echoed in her ears, veiled allusions to a secret, a hidden past, a truth shrouded in whispers and hesitant silences. One phrase, repeated like a mantra, clung to her thoughts. A miracle, a gift from the heavens, but with a price. A hesitant knock on the studio door shattered the quiet intensity. Her elderly Aunt Mathilde, her face etched with the lines of a life lived quietly, yet with hidden depths, stood on the threshold. The weight of years seemed to cling to her, yet her eyes held a spark of understanding. Isabella, Sherry, Aunt Mathilde began, her voice frail but firm. There are things you should know, things your mother. She couldn't bring herself to tell you. Isabella's heart pounded. She felt a tremor of fear, a chilling premonition, yet a desperate hope, too. She beckoned her aunt inside. The old woman's presence filled the room, a poignant blend of age and unspoken knowledge. It's about your birth, ma petite, Aunt Mathilde continued, her voice barely a whisper, as though revealing a sacred secret. A fertility clinic, a doctor, a procedure. They said it was a miracle, but miracles often carry a hidden cost. Isabella sat, the canvas, her unfinished masterpiece, forgotten. The dust motes, once a symbol of her internal confusion, now felt suspended in time, waiting, expectant. The truth, like a slow, creeping tide, began to engulf her. The fragmented memories, the whispered secrets, the gnawing sense of something missing, suddenly coalesced into a single, terrifying question. Who was she, truly, and what price had been paid for her existence? The crisp autumn air bit at Isabella's cheeks as she walked, the city lights blurring through her unshed tears. Aunt Mathilde's words echoed, a relentless mantra. Miracle, a price. The scent of damp leaves and exhaust fumes did little to soothe the turmoil within. Reaching her studio, the familiar clutter felt oppressive, a stark reflection of her fractured state. She collapsed onto the worn velvet chaise lounge, the plush fabric offering little comfort. The half-finished canvas, a chaotic mess of color and form, mocked her inadequacy. She picked up the faded photograph again, her mother's smile a ghost of a memory, a painful reminder of a past she barely knew. A sob escaped her lips, raw and ragged. A soft knock. Hesitantly, she opened the door to find Liam, his face etched with concern. He held a small, worn, leather-bound book. I found this in my father's study," Liam stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's an old journal. It mentions a fertility clinic, a Dr. Albright, and 3 names." He opened the book, his fingers tracing the spidery handwriting. Isabella leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. There, scrawled in elegant cursive, were 3 names: Liam Morrison, Isabella Avignon, Casper Reed. Beneath each, a single, chilling word: experiment. The weight of the revelation pressed down on them both. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of a nearby grandfather clock. Fear mingled with a strange, unexpected sense of connection. A shared secret, a hidden history, bound them together in a way neither could have anticipated. Liam reached out, his hand gently covering hers. The shared touch sparked a fragile flame of hope amidst the ashes of their uncertain pasts. The cold fear lingered, but now it was tempered with something else: a shared destiny, a shared sorrow, and perhaps a shared future. The scent of old paper and dust clung to Isabella like a second skin. Liam's journal, a relic of a hidden past, lay open before them, the spidery handwriting a chilling testament to their shared, impossible origins. The flickering gas lamp cast long shadows across the worn wooden table, highlighting the 3 names: Liam, Isabella, Casper, each followed by the damning word: experiment. "A Dr. Albright," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock. The words felt alien yet terrifyingly familiar. The weight of the revelation settled on her, a physical burden she could barely bear. Liam's hand, still covering hers, offered a fragile anchor in the storm of emotions swirling within her. He looked at her, his eyes mirroring her own shock and fear, yet also something more: a tentative hope. This changes everything," Liam said, his voice strained. The journal detailed a clandestine fertility clinic, advanced reproductive technologies far beyond their time, and a doctor willing to bend or break ethical boundaries for profit. The chilling implications were slowly dawning on them both. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, the sound echoing the turmoil in Isabella's heart. The city outside, usually vibrant and exciting, felt menacing, a cruel observer of their fragile secret. The city that had always felt alien now felt as if it held the key to understanding. "It explains so much," Isabella murmured, tracing the elegant script with her fingertip. The years of inexplicable familial tension, the nagging sense of displacement, the artistic block that had paralyzed her, all began to coalesce into a horrifying, yet strangely liberating truth. She felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration, a dizzying cocktail of fear and understanding. Liam squeezed her hand, a silent promise of support in the face of their shared ordeal. The weight of the secret, once a solitary burden, now felt lighter, shared. The fear remained, a constant companion, but now it was diluted by a nascent sense of belonging, a shared destiny that transcended their individual struggles. The shared gaze held a silent acknowledgement. They weren't alone. The impossible truth, once a chilling revelation, now felt like a fragile link to a family they never knew they had. And in the shared silence, a quiet hope began to blossom, as fragile as a newborn's breath. The Parisian garret, a chaotic explosion of paint tubes and half-finished canvases, felt suffocating to Isabella. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through the grimy window pane, illuminating the swirling chaos of her life. The scent of turpentine hung heavy in the air, a constant, acrid reminder of her creative paralysis. Liam's words echoed in her mind. Experiment. The word, a cold, clinical term, felt like a branding iron searing her soul. She picked up a worn photograph, its edges frayed with age. A younger Isabella, bright-eyed and carefree, smiled back at her. The girl in the picture seemed a lifetime away, a stranger inhabiting a life she could barely remember. A tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. A hesitant knock on the door. Her aunt, Madame Dubois, a woman etched with the lines of a life lived fully, yet shadowed by unspoken sorrows, entered. "Isabella, Sherry?" she began, her voice soft but laced with concern. "I found something in the attic." Madame Dubois laid a small, leather-bound book on the table. Its pages, brittle with age, contained faded sketches and fragmented journal entries. Isabella's grandmother's handwriting. Words like miracle, forbidden, and Albright jumped out from the yellowed pages. A chilling connection to Liam's journal. The air thickened with unspoken truths. "Your mother, she always spoke of a secret," Madame Dubois whispered, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and fear. "A secret she took to her grave." Isabella's breath hitched. The weight of the past, the years of uncertainty, now felt like a physical pressure crushing her chest. She ran her finger over a sketch of 3 tiny infants, nestled together. A gut-wrenching realization washed over her. This wasn't just about her, it was about Liam, Casper, about all of them. "It explains everything," she breathed, her voice trembling. The fear remained, but it was overshadowed by a surge of something else. A powerful sense of connection, of belonging. A shared trauma, yes, but also a shared destiny. The pieces were falling into place. A terrifying yet strangely liberating truth. She wasn't alone. She had a family, and finding them, facing them, was just the beginning. The rain lashed against the grimy windows of Casper's secluded cottage, mirroring the tempest brewing inside him. He sat hunched over a worn wooden desk, the flickering gaslight casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and old books, felt suffocating. He traced a faded photograph with a trembling finger, 3 infants, impossibly alike, their tiny fingers intertwined. A memory, fragmented and blurry, surfaced. The sterile scent of antiseptic, the low hum of machinery, a woman's hushed whisper. He shivered, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumnal air. A sharp rap at the door startled him. He hesitated, his heart hammering against his ribs. He hadn't had a visitor in months. He opened the door cautiously, revealing Liam and Isabella standing on his doorstep, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Rain beaded on their hair, mirroring the tears welling in Isabella's eyes. "Casper," Liam began, his voice rough with emotion. We found something." He held out a crumpled newspaper clipping, the headline screaming about a decades-old fertility clinic scandal. Isabella's breath hitched as Casper took the clipping, his eyes widening at the familiar name, Dr. Albright. The cottage, small and cluttered, felt suddenly too small to contain the weight of their shared history. They sat huddled together, the flickering gaslight painting their faces in shades of fear and hope. They spoke in hushed whispers, piecing together fragmented memories, connecting the dots of their separate pasts. The shared trauma, the years of loneliness, the unanswered questions. It all coalesced into a horrifying and beautiful truth. They were not just 3 individuals. They were 3 parts of a whole, bound together by a medical miracle and a conspiracy of silence. The rain continued its relentless assault, but inside the cottage, a fragile warmth began to bloom, a spark of hope amidst the storm. For the first time, they felt truly seen, truly understood. They weren't alone. The cottage's air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp wool, held a palpable tension. Liam, his normally sharp features softened with worry, watched Isabella trace the faded ink of the newspaper clipping. Her fingers trembled, a stark contrast to the unwavering strength in her eyes. Casper, his gaze fixed on the photograph of 3 identical infants, seemed frozen in time, a ghost haunted by a past he barely remembered. "Dr. Albright, he's the key," Casper whispered, his voice raspy, like leaves rustling in a dying wind. The photograph felt heavy in his hands, a tangible weight of unspoken history. Isabella nodded, her voice thick with unshed tears. My grandmother, she always hinted at something wrong, something hidden. She spoke of a doctor, a miracle, a secret shame. The memory brought a fresh wave of grief, a painful echo of a life she never truly knew. Liam reached out, his hand covering hers. We need answers, he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his own hands. The weight of their shared discovery pressed down on them, a shared burden, a shared destiny. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window panes. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging within them, a tempest of fear, uncertainty, and a flicker of hope. They were connected, inextricably linked by a past shrouded in secrecy and a future yet unwritten. The shared gaze, the unspoken understanding passing between them, sealed a bond forged not in blood, but in shared trauma and the fierce determination to uncover the truth. The rain continued its relentless assault, yet within the small, dimly lit cottage, a fragile warmth began to bloom, a tenacious seed of hope sprouting in the fertile ground of shared sorrow. The revelation had only just begun. The cottage, nestled deep within the whispering pines, felt suffocatingly small under the weight of their shared secret. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing within Liam. He watched Isabella, her face pale and etched with exhaustion, reread the faded newspaper clipping detailing Dr. Albright's controversial fertility practices. The scent of wood smoke, usually comforting, now felt acrid, a suffocating reminder of their precarious situation. Casper, his usual reclusiveness amplified by the gravity of the situation, sat hunched over the photograph, his fingers tracing the contours of the 3 identical babies. The flickering lamplight cast long, dancing shadows, making the scene feel both intimate and profoundly unsettling. He used experimental techniques, Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. Techniques that were illegal. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. The fragile hope that had bloomed moments ago seemed to wilt under the weight of this new revelation. Liam placed a comforting hand on her arm. We knew it was a risk, he said, his voice a low rumble. The anger simmering beneath his calm exterior threatened to boil over. But we have to find out the truth. For ourselves. For all of us. Casper finally looked up, his eyes, usually shadowed and distant, now ablaze with a fierce determination. He's still alive, he announced, his voice stronger than before, a hint of steel in his tone. I found his address, in a hidden compartment of my grandmother's old trunk. He lives in Switzerland. The silence that followed was charged, thick with the unspoken implications of his words. The journey to Switzerland, the confrontation with Dr. Albright, it represented a leap into the unknown, a confrontation with a past they barely understood, yet were inextricably bound to. Fear mingled with a desperate hope, a fragile ember glowing in the heart of the storm. They were 3 strangers, bound together by a secret that threatened to shatter their lives. Yet, in this shared trauma, a new kind of kinship was blooming, a tenacious vine reaching for the light, determined to survive against all odds. The rain continued its relentless assault, but within the small cottage, a silent pact was formed, a vow to face whatever lay ahead, together. The Swiss chalet stood stark against the alpine backdrop, a pristine white against the brutal gray of the sky. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of pine and anticipation. Casper, his hands trembling slightly, adjusted his collar, the crisp fabric a stark contrast to the turmoil within. He hadn't felt this vulnerable in years. Isabella, perched on a worn armchair, nervously twisted a silver ring. The journey had been grueling, a physical manifestation of the emotional roller coaster they'd been on since discovering their shared secret. Liam, ever the anchor, paced the room, his jaw clenched, the faint scent of his expensive cologne doing little to mask the tension radiating from him. He's here, Casper said, his voice barely a whisper, breaking the tense silence. The sound of footsteps approaching echoed through the hallway, slow and deliberate. Dr. Albright, frail but sharp-eyed, entered. His face, etched with the weight of years and regret, held a chilling calmness that unnerved Liam. He was a ghost from their past, a specter of a life they were only beginning to comprehend. "You found me," Albright said, his voice raspy, yet surprisingly strong. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the trio, lingering on each face. "I suppose this means the secret is out." Isabella's voice, tight with suppressed anger, cut through the air. "The secret? You call it a secret, Doctor? 3 lives, irrevocably altered by your ambition." Liam stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You played God, Albright, and you destroyed families in the process." He clenched his fists, the urge to strike the old man almost overwhelming. Albright sighed, a weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades of deception. "It wasn't about destruction, Liam. It was a breakthrough, a scientific marvel. But the consequences, they were unforeseen." He hesitated, then continued, his voice laced with a hint of something akin to remorse. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Casper, until now a silent observer, spoke, his voice low and measured. "You used us. You experimented on us, and then abandoned us to face the consequences alone." His words hung in the air, a chilling indictment. The rain outside intensified, a mournful counterpoint to the rising tension within the room. The confrontation had begun, and the truth, long buried, was finally beginning to surface. The weight of years of deceit pressed down on them all. The fate of their lives, and the unraveling of a powerful man's world, hung precariously in the balance. The chalet's stone fireplace crackled, spitting embers that mirrored the fiery anger simmering in Liam. He stared at Dr. Albright, the old man's frail form a stark contrast to the monumental weight of his actions. The scent of pine and damp wool clung to the air, a suffocating blanket against the raw emotion in the room. Isabella's silver ring, a constant fidget in her hands, reflected the flickering firelight, a tiny beacon in the storm of their confrontation. "Unforeseen." Liam's voice, raw with barely contained rage, cut through the silence. "You called destroying families, creating us, unforeseen? You experimented on women, stole their genetic material, their hopes, their futures." He took a step closer, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Casper, pale and drawn, remained seated, his eyes fixed on Albright. His usual quiet reserve shattered, revealing a deep well of pain. "You took our childhoods, Doctor. You robbed us of knowing who we truly are, of having a normal life." His voice was low, each word measured, a carefully constructed weapon aimed at the heart of the old man's callous indifference. Albright shifted in his chair, a slight tremor in his hands betraying his age and the crushing weight of his guilt. I believed I was doing something good," he whispered, his voice a frail echo in the vast room. "A medical miracle. I was blinded by my ambition. I truly was." Isabella, her voice trembling, spoke softly yet with devastating clarity. "Good? You call tearing families apart, creating this impossible bond between us? Good? My mother," she struggled. "She suffered, never understanding why she couldn't fully connect with me." The rain outside intensified, drumming a frantic rhythm against the window panes, mirroring the storm of emotions raging within the chalet. The weight of their shared trauma, the years of unanswered questions, the stolen pieces of their identities, all converged in this tense standoff, a silent accusation hanging heavier than the alpine air. Albright's confession, while offering a sliver of explanation, felt inadequate, a paltry attempt to justify the profound damage inflicted on 3 lives. The truth, a jagged shard of reality, was finally piercing through the carefully constructed lies, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The fight for justice had just begun. The stale air of the interrogation room hung heavy with unspoken accusations. Anna, her face etched with worry, watched Alara, her usually composed friend now trembling slightly. The fluorescent lights hummed a discordant tune, reflecting harshly off the polished steel table between them. A single, bare bulb cast long shadows, stretching the already cramped space. "They threatened me, Anna?" Alara whispered, her voice barely audible above the persistent hum. The fear in her eyes was palpable. "Said if I kept digging, they'd make sure no one ever believed a word I said." Anna reached across the table, her hand covering Alara's. "I know, Alara. I saw the bruises on your arm," she said, her voice a low, steady murmur, offering support in the sterile environment. The touch was a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. The pressure of the investigation, the constant fear of reprisal, it was wearing Alara down. "But this isn't just about me anymore," Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. "It's about Liam, Isabella, Casper. They deserve the truth. They deserve to know why their lives feel wrong." Her gaze was intense, a fierce determination burning within her usually calm eyes. The scent of antiseptic clashed with the faint perfume Alara usually wore, highlighting the intensity of the moment. The weight of their shared secret pressed down on them, the chilling implication of what they'd uncovered. The hushed conversations, the furtive glances, the mounting fear, it was all converging. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a fight for justice, a battle against a system designed to protect its own. The ticking clock on the wall seemed to mock their precarious position, each second a stark reminder of the dwindling time before the storm truly broke. The threat against them was real, palpable. The cold steel of the table a chilling echo of the danger they faced. Yet, in their shared fear, a renewed sense of purpose ignited. The fight, however perilous, had only just begun. The chipped paint on the windowsill felt rough beneath Isabella's fingertips as she stared out at the rain-slicked streets. The Parisian twilight cast long, melancholic shadows, mirroring the turmoil within her. Her studio, usually a haven of vibrant colors and creative chaos, felt suffocating. The half-finished canvas mocked her, a stark white expanse reflecting her own emptiness. Liam's words echoed in her mind. *3 of us, born on the same day to different families. Impossible. Yet, the unsettling coincidence, the shared sense of unease that had resonated between them at their accidental meeting, felt undeniable. A soft knock startled her. Her grandmother, Madame Dubois, her face etched with the wisdom of 80 years, stood in the doorway, a steaming mug in her hand. "Isabelle, ma chérie, you haven't touched your food. This storm will pass, like all storms," she murmured, her voice soft as the falling rain. Isabella managed a weak smile. "Grandmere, it's not the storm. It's..." She hesitated, unable to articulate the unsettling truth that hung between them, unspoken yet palpable. Madame Dubois' eyes, shrewd and knowing, held hers. "You found something, didn't you? Something about your past. Something they tried to hide." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the certainty in it was unwavering. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. I don't understand. 3 of us, born on the same day, different families, but connected, like threads in a hidden tapestry." Her grandmother's hand gently found hers. "Some truths," she whispered, "are woven deep, hidden beneath layers of deceit and silence, the shadows under his eyes. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the earth-shattering revelation, since his meticulously constructed life had imploded." The cool glass felt cold against his skin, mirroring the chill that settled deep in his bones. He ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture offering little comfort. His father, Arthur Morrison, the titan of industry, the man who had defined Liam's existence, was a broken shell, his empire crumbling around him. The weight of it pressed heavily on Liam's chest, a suffocating burden. The phone buzzed, jarring him from his reverie. It was Isabella. He hesitated, the simple act of answering feeling monumental. "Liam," her voice, usually bright and full of life, was hesitant, tinged with a vulnerability that mirrored his own. I need to talk." He swallowed, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. "I know," he managed, his voice raspy. Me too. Their meeting was arranged in a small, quiet cafe tucked away in a cobbled side street, a world away from the opulent surroundings of Liam's usual haunts. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries couldn't mask the underlying tension that hung heavy between them. Isabella looked pale, her vibrant eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but there was a newfound strength in her gaze, a defiance that resonated with him. "It's surreal," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of conversation. To actually know." She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic mug, a sound that felt amplified in the quiet space. "I keep expecting to wake up." Liam nodded, understanding flooding him. The shared trauma, the impossible truth that bound them together. It was a burden they now carried, yet also a fragile, unexpected bond. "The past? It's changed everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's also given us something real." He looked at Isabella, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. The raw honesty in her eyes was a reflection of his own emotions. A new foundation, a new family, forged in the fires of a hidden past. The road ahead was daunting, but now, for the first time, he wasn't alone. The cafe, bathed in the warm glow of afternoon sun, offered a fragile sanctuary. Isabella traced patterns on the condensation clinging to her glass, her fingers leaving ephemeral trails. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken anxieties. Liam watched her, the sharp lines of his usual controlled demeanor softened by a weary vulnerability. He'd spent the last 3 weeks adrift, the foundations of his life shattered, replaced by a bewildering new reality. "My father," Isabella began, her voice barely a whisper. He doesn't understand." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Arthur Morrison's world, once a fortress of power and influence, had crumbled, leaving behind a wreckage of broken promises and shattered trust. Liam nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. He'd witnessed his father's descent, the steely gaze replaced by a hollowed emptiness. The man he'd known, the man who'd shaped his life, was gone, replaced by a ghost haunted by the ghosts of his past. "Mine either," Liam admitted, his voice rough. "But there's something else now, isn't there?" He gestured vaguely, encompassing the quiet cafe, the shared secret that bound them, the fragile hope that flickered between them. Isabella met his gaze, her eyes glistening. "A family," she breathed, the word carrying the weight of centuries of longing and a lifetime of searching. The unspoken understanding deepened, a silent acknowledgement of a bond forged not in blood, but in shared trauma and an improbable destiny. A tentative smile touched her lips, a fragile bloom in the aftermath of devastation. A shared glance, a silent agreement, a moment of profound connection. It was enough. The burden remained, the future uncertain, but in the quiet intimacy of the cafe, amongst the aroma of coffee and the murmur of other lives, they found solace, a nascent strength, a promise of something new. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but they wouldn't walk it alone. The biting November wind whipped around Alara as she hurried down the rain-slicked street, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. The weight of the past few weeks pressed down on her, the relentless barrage of phone calls, the anonymous threats scrawled on her apartment door, the looming shadow of potential legal action. Anna's face, pale and strained, flickered in her mind's eye. Their shared investigation, once a thrilling quest for truth, had morphed into a harrowing battle for survival. The warmth of her small apartment was a stark contrast to the chilling reality outside. A steaming mug of chamomile tea sat on the table, untouched. She sank onto the worn sofa, the fabric soft against her skin, yet offering little comfort. The articles, splashed across the front pages of every major newspaper, stung like 1,000 paper cuts. "Archivist exposes medical scandal," screamed one headline. Another, more accusatory, "Whistleblower endangers public trust." Her phone buzzed. It was Anna. Alara hesitated, her hand hovering over the device. The call went to voicemail, a message, tight with anxiety, crackled through the speaker. "Alara, they're escalating. They're trying to shut us down. Meet me at the usual place tomorrow midday. It's important." The usual place was a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe, nestled amongst a maze of cobblestone streets. The air inside smelled of strong coffee and baking bread, a comforting counterpoint to the storm raging inside Alara. She needed Anna. She needed the strength of their shared purpose to face the mounting pressure. The fear, sharp and cold, clawed at her, but the quiet determination that had fueled her investigation remained, a stubborn ember in the face of the gale. Tomorrow, she would face the consequences, whatever they may be. The fight was far from over. The truth, once unearthed, demanded its due, regardless of the cost. The cafe buzzed with the low hum of conversation, the scent of roasted coffee beans battling the lingering aroma of yesterday's pastries. Liam, Isabella, and Casper sat huddled around a small table, the remnants of their lunch scattered amongst them. The weight of their shared secret hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension woven into the fabric of their newly formed bond. "It's a lot to process," Isabella murmured, her fingers tracing patterns on her coffee cup. Her usual vibrant energy was subdued, replaced by a fragile vulnerability. The revelation had shattered her carefully constructed image of her family, leaving her adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Casper, his eyes shadowed and distant, nodded slowly. "More than I could have ever imagined." He spoke rarely, his words carefully chosen, each syllable carrying the weight of his years of solitude. The shared history was a balm to his isolation, yet also a painful reminder of the life he'd never known. Liam, usually the confident, controlled one, leaned back, his gaze distant. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying a turmoil beneath his composed exterior. "My father, he knew, and he kept it from me. For years." The words were laced with a mixture of anger and heartbreak, the betrayal cutting deeper than he'd ever anticipated. A silence fell between them, broken only by the clinking of cutlery from a nearby table. The shared trauma forged a connection stronger than any blood tie, but the path ahead remained uncertain. The fear of the unknown was a constant companion, a shadow lurking at the edge of their newfound understanding. Yet, amidst the storm of emotions, a quiet hope flickered, the hope of healing, of building something real from the ashes of deceit. The promise of a family, forged not in biology, but in shared experience and unwavering loyalty. They knew the fight wasn't over. The legal battles, the media scrutiny, the threat of their father's influence, these would linger. But for this moment, surrounded by the comforting chaos of a bustling cafe, they found solace in each other's presence, a shared understanding that transcended words. Their journey had only just begun. The courtroom air hung thick with the scent of old wood and nervous sweat. Arthur Morrison, his usually impeccable suit rumpled, sat stiffly, his face a mask of controlled fury. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack echoing the shattering of his meticulously crafted life. Liam watched from the gallery, his heart a trapped bird fluttering against his ribs. The verdict was read, each word a hammer blow. Guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Liam felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice, it seemed, was a bitter pill. The victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the knowledge of the man his father was, the truth he'd kept buried for so long. He glanced at Isabella and Casper, their faces etched with a similar blend of emotions. The shared trauma, the revelation of their unconventional origins, had forged an unbreakable bond between them, a familial connection stronger than blood. Later, outside the courthouse, the city noise seemed muted, filtered through a haze of disbelief. Isabella's hand found his, a silent gesture of support. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of the street. Casper nodded, his usual taciturn demeanor softened by a rare, poignant smile. "But it's also just the beginning," Liam added, his voice rough. The legal battles were far from over. The media storm raged. Their father's influence still cast a long shadow. Yet, together, they faced the unknown, a trio bound not by biology, but by a shared fight for truth and a new, uncertain future. The future, for them, was a tapestry woven with threads of sorrow, anger, and a fragile, yet resilient, hope. The city lights blurred through Liam's rain-streaked window. He felt the weight of the day, the verdict's echo still humming in his ears. He poured a whiskey, the amber liquid a stark contrast to the gray cityscape. Isabella's words played in his mind. It's also just the beginning. A beginning of what? He wasn't sure. Casper entered, his quiet presence filling the small apartment like a gentle snowfall. He carried a worn leather-bound book, its pages filled with faded photographs and pressed flowers. "I found this in my grandmother's attic," he murmured, handing it to Liam. "Old family history. Some things I think you might want to see." The photographs were grainy, showing a young Arthur Morrison, a far cry from the cold, calculating man they knew. He was smiling, genuinely smiling, with a woman whose eyes held a warmth that was absent in his. Liam felt a pang of sadness. He'd never known his father like this, not before the carefully constructed persona solidified. "He wasn't always this way," Casper whispered, breaking the silence. His voice carried a weight of understanding beyond his years. Liam nodded, tears pricking his eyes. He felt a connection to this man, this ghost of a father, far stronger than the one he'd known in life. Isabella joined them, her usual vibrancy dimmed but her spirit unbroken. She picked up a photograph, her finger tracing the lines of the woman's face. She looks familiar," she murmured, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Were there others? More siblings, hidden away? Their existence unknown? The seed of doubt, once sown, began to take root. The fight for justice might be over, but a new, more personal battle was only just beginning. The weight of their shared secret, their shared past, pressed down upon them, a burden and a bond all at once. The chipped paint on the windowsill felt cold beneath Liam's fingers. Rain lashed against the glass, mirroring the tempest inside him. The verdict hadn't brought the closure he'd craved. Justice had been served, but the gaping hole in his life remained. Isabella, curled on the worn sofa, sketched furiously, her charcoal a frantic dance across the paper. The rhythmic scratch was a counterpoint to the storm raging outside and the quiet turmoil within. Casper, ever the observer, sat by the flickering fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on his face. He held a small, tarnished silver locket, turning it over and over in his hands. "I found this amongst my grandmother's things," he said softly, his voice barely audible above the wind. It feels significant." Liam rose, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. He walked to Casper, the scent of wood smoke and damp wool clinging to him. The locket, cool to the touch, felt heavy with unspoken history. He opened it, revealing a tiny, faded photograph. A young woman, her smile radiant, her eyes mirroring Isabella's. Isabella looked up, her charcoal stilled. That's her," she breathed, her voice choked with emotion. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman in the locket was the missing piece, the linchpin connecting their fragmented pasts. The shared sorrow, the unspoken question, solidified into a profound realization. "Our mother," Liam whispered, the words hanging in the air, charged with grief, wonder, and a tentative hope. The rain continued to fall, a constant, mournful rhythm underscoring the weight of their shared discovery. The truth, once a painful revelation, now felt like a fragile bridge, connecting them to a past they'd never known, and a future they were only beginning to build together. The flickering firelight painted their faces in shifting hues of hope and sorrow, a silent testament to their resilient spirits, forged in the crucible of shared trauma and unexpected kinship. The city outside raged, but within their small apartment, a quiet understanding bloomed amidst the ruins of their pasts. The morning sun, weak and watery, filtered through the dusty attic window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. Liam sat amidst boxes overflowing with his father's discarded possessions, legal documents, faded photographs, and the ghosts of a life he barely knew. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture weary, the emotion deeper. The legal battle had ended, the truth exposed, but the healing hadn't begun. He picked up a worn leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. His father's spidery handwriting filled the margins, a testament to a life lived in shadows. Isabella arrived, her vibrant energy a stark contrast to the gloom of the attic. The scent of her perfume, a blend of bergamot and vanilla, momentarily dispelled the mustiness. She knelt beside him, her eyes searching his face with a mixture of concern and understanding. "How are you?" she asked, her voice soft, laced with compassion. I don't know," Liam admitted, his voice thick with unshed tears. "It feels like I've lost two fathers. One to the court and one to myself." Casper entered, his usual quiet demeanor even more pronounced in the stillness of the attic. He carried a small, intricately carved wooden box, the wood polished smooth by years of handling. "I found this in the Reed family vault," he said, his voice a low murmur. It contained this. He opened the box, revealing a single, delicate silver key. "A key?" Isabella questioned, her brow furrowed in curiosity. Liam picked it up, its coolness a stark contrast to the warmth of Isabella's hand resting on his arm. A sudden, sharp memory pierced him, a recurring dream, a locked door, a sense of profound loss. He looked at Casper, a spark of understanding flickering between them. I think this is the key to unlocking something more than just a door." The weight of their shared past, their newly forged bond, settled upon them, a shared burden, but also a promise. The attic, filled with the detritus of the past, suddenly felt like a space of possibility, of healing, and of a future yet unwritten, a future they would face, together. The scent of wood smoke and damp earth hung heavy in the air as Liam, Isabella, and Casper stood before the crumbling Reed family cottage. Ivy, thick as a man's arm, clawed at the stone walls, whispering secrets to the wind. The silver key, cool against Liam's palm, felt strangely alive. He hesitated, the weight of expectation pressing down. "Ready?" Isabella's voice, usually bright, held a tremor of uncertainty. She clutched a worn sketchbook, its pages filled with charcoal sketches, swirling lines that mirrored the turmoil in her heart. Casper, ever the silent observer, simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the overgrown doorway. The air thrummed with unspoken anxieties, a silent symphony of shared apprehension. The key, a tangible link to a past they were only beginning to understand, felt heavy with the weight of secrets. Liam inserted the key into the lock. A low, grating sound echoed through the stillness, the sound of a door resisting the passage of time. With a final, resolute turn, the lock clicked open. The heavy wooden door creaked inwards, revealing a dimly lit interior, the air thick with the smell of dust and forgotten memories. Inside, the cottage was a poignant time capsule. A half-finished painting stood on an easel, its colors muted by time, yet hinting at a vibrant past. A child's drawing, crude yet endearing, lay abandoned on a dusty table. Each object whispered a story, a fragment of a life lived, a life they were now inextricably bound to. This is where he lived? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and sorrow. The sketchbook slipped from her grasp, falling silently to the floor. Liam swallowed, his throat tight. He could feel the weight of his father's deception, the crushing burden of a past deliberately obscured. Yet, amid the sadness, a glimmer of hope flickered. The shared silence, the shared grief was bonding them in a way no legal document ever could. The discovery of this place, this forgotten sanctuary, was their first step towards healing, towards building something new, something real, from the ashes of their past. The cottage's interior was a mausoleum of forgotten joys. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight slicing through a grimy window, illuminating faded wallpaper depicting a pastoral scene long since overtaken by reality. Isabella knelt, picking up the child's drawing, a stick-figure family, awkwardly rendered, yet radiating a poignant innocence. A sob escaped her lips, a sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. He drew this, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, the charcoal smudged beneath her trembling fingers. Liam, watching her, felt a pang of empathy so sharp it stole his breath. He'd always felt a hollowness within him, a void he couldn't name. Now, surrounded by the ghosts of Casper's childhood, he understood. This wasn't just about a scientific anomaly. It was about a life deliberately stolen. Casper, usually so reserved, stepped forward, his hand resting gently on Isabella's shoulder. A rare smile, hesitant yet genuine, touched his lips. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice low and comforting. The unspoken understanding between them, forged in shared trauma, was a silent language stronger than words. The weight of their shared history pressed down, heavy and suffocating. But within that weight, something else was growing. A fragile hope, a tentative trust. The past remained a scar, a jagged wound that wouldn't easily heal. But in this crumbling cottage, amidst the dust and forgotten memories, they found something akin to a sanctuary, a place to begin the slow, arduous process of piecing their lives back together. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, painting the walls in hues of deepening twilight. The silence, no longer oppressive, now held a quiet strength, a shared understanding that transcended words. They were bound, not just by a shared past, but by the promise of a future they would forge together, a future where belonging was no longer an elusive dream. The journey ahead remained daunting, fraught with uncertainty. Yet, in this moment, united by grief and hope, they felt stronger, ready to face whatever came next. The sterile scent of antiseptic still clung to Liam, a phantom smell from his father's opulent office. He stared out the rain-streaked window of his minimalist apartment, the city lights blurring into an indistinguishable smear. The revelation had hit him like a physical blow, shattering the carefully constructed facade of his life. He ran a hand through his hair, the strands damp with sweat despite the cool night air. "A different identity," he muttered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The weight of Arthur Morrison's legacy, once a source of pride, now felt like a suffocating blanket. He picked up his phone, the cool glass a stark contrast to the burning anger simmering within him. He punched in his father's number, the action a rebellion against the years of carefully cultivated silence. The line rang, a jarring intrusion into the quiet turmoil of his thoughts. Arthur's voice, clipped and controlled, answered on the third ring. "Liam." It was devoid of warmth, the usual paternal facade absent. "I need to talk to you," Liam said, his voice rough, betraying the emotion he struggled to contain. "About everything." Arthur's silence was heavy, pregnant with unspoken accusations and resentments. "This conversation can wait," he finally replied, his voice laced with thinly veiled disdain. "No, it can't," Liam countered, his voice rising in volume. "This isn't about business, Father. It's about us." The words hung in the air, stark and vulnerable. He felt a tremor run through him, a mixture of fear and defiance. He needed answers, a true understanding of who he was, beyond the carefully constructed image his father had cultivated. This wasn't just about accepting a different identity. It was about reclaiming his own. The call ended abruptly, leaving Liam staring at the phone, the silence punctuated by the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window pane, a mournful symphony mirroring the turmoil within his heart. He knew this wasn't the end of their confrontation, but the beginning of something far more complex and potentially explosive. The weight of his past threatened to crush him. Yet, amidst the ruins, a seed of defiance had been planted. He would fight for his truth. The biting November wind whipped at Alara's coat as she walked, the city lights blurring into shimmering streaks. Anna's words echoed in her ears. "Justice isn't always clean, Alara." the weight of their actions pressed down, a heavy cloak of responsibility. The legal battles loomed, the threats still whispered on the periphery, but a fragile peace had settled over her. A weariness settled in her bones, a deep, bone-aching exhaustion, yet a quiet satisfaction hummed beneath. She'd done what she believed was right, even if the cost was high. Reaching her small apartment, the warmth of the lamplight felt like a balm on her chilled skin. The aroma of brewing tea, a comforting ritual, filled the air. The phone buzzed, jarring her from her quiet contemplation. It was Anna. Met with the lawyer. Anna's voice crackled through the speaker. They're dropping the charges. The pressure from the public. It worked. A silent sigh escaped Alara. Relief washed over her, bittersweet and profound. But, Anna continued, her voice softening, it's not over. The Morrison empire is crumbling. But Arthur, he's still out there. A chill snaked down Alara's spine. She knew instinctively the fight wasn't finished. Arthur Morrison's shadow stretched long and dark. Later, sipping her tea, the city lights painting the window panes in a kaleidoscope of colors, Alara reflected on the past months. The faces of Liam, Isabella, and Casper flickered in her mind, three individuals. Once strangers, now bound by a shared, impossible truth. She thought of the resilience of the human spirit, the extraordinary capacity for healing and connection, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their story, a testament to the enduring power of human bonds, had changed her life forever. The yellowed birth certificates, the cold files, the sterile hospital, all now faded memories in the warmth of a new dawn. The fight for justice was far from over, but for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph, a fleeting peace in the eye of a storm that would undoubtedly rage on. The future remained uncertain, but hope, a small, tenacious flame, flickered within her heart. The courtroom was stifling, the air thick with unspoken tension. Alara sat beside Anna, the scent of old paper and cheap perfume clinging to her clothes. Liam, Isabella, and Casper sat in the gallery, their faces pale but resolute. The judge's gavel fell, echoing the finality of the verdict. Arthur Morrison was found guilty on multiple counts, his empire crumbling around him. Relief washed over Alara, a wave so powerful it almost knocked her off her feet. Yet, it was tinged with a profound sadness. Winning hadn't brought the catharsis she'd expected. It's over, Anna whispered, her voice hoarse. She squeezed Alara's hand, her eyes reflecting the weight of their shared journey. Outside, the city thrummed with a different energy. The crisp autumn air felt cleaner, lighter. Liam approached them, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, for everything. Isabella and Casper joined them, a silent understanding passing between the three. The years of uncertainty, of searching, of longing, all culminated in this shared moment of quiet triumph. The bond between them, forged in the crucible of a shared secret, was stronger than any blood tie. We need to talk, Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. The weight of the revelation, the impact of their shared past, hung heavy in the air. They found a quiet cafe, the aroma of coffee a stark contrast to the harsh reality of their shared history. The conversation flowed, hesitant at first, then gaining momentum as old wounds were cautiously probed and slowly healed. They talked about forgiveness, about healing, about building a future together. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be understood, embraced, and ultimately transcended. The siblings had found their family, a bond forged not in blood, but in shared experience and unwavering loyalty. A new chapter began, one born of sorrow but ultimately one of hope and healing. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked window of Alara's small apartment. Empty coffee cups and scattered papers littered the table, remnants of sleepless nights spent piecing together the fractured lives of Liam, Isabella, and Casper. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but a quiet satisfaction settled in its wake. Justice had been served, but the true work had only just begun. Anna's call cracked through the quiet, a mixture of relief and apprehension coloring her voice. They're planning a press conference, she said, her voice strained. Liam wants to tell his story.